Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're taking on Michael Fitzgerald's Autism and Creativity. And, well, the title's pretty self-explanatory, right? But the core idea here, the thing that really caught my eye, is this connection Fitzgerald makes between, well, autism and exceptional ability.
Yeah, he dives right into some pretty bold claims. Like right off the bat, Fitzgerald says that when it comes to genius, major genetic endowment, it actually overshadows like Trump's environment.
Really, so all those nurture versus nature debates, he's coming down firmly on the nature side.
It seems that way, at least when it comes to exceptional ability, genius level stuff. And he goes even further, saying that, those autistic traits, things like impaired social skills, could actually be what fuels those big creative breakthroughs.
So it's almost like those things we often see as weaknesses, as limitations, could actually be strengths in certain contexts.
Exactly. Like, think about the intense focus, the attention to detail that a lot of autistic individuals have. Those can be challenging in some social settings, but man, they're so valuable when it comes to things like scientific research or artistic creation.
Yeah, it's almost like a trade-off.
Hmm.
Less emphasis on social intelligence, but way more capacity for that deep focus.
Yeah.
The unconventional things.
Precisely. And Fitzgerald, he really pushes beyond that stereotypical image of the autistic savant, that person with extraordinary abilities in one specific area, but who struggles in other aspects of life. He's much more interested in high-functioning autism and Asperger's syndrome and how these folks can be incredibly intelligent and original, even if they come off as a little eccentric.
Right. So these are people who can, function well in society, but maybe have some quirks, some differences in how they think and how they interact with the world.
Yeah, exactly. And those quirks, those differences, those are the things that Fitzgerald finds so fascinating. He highlights how these individuals often think in unconventional ways, challenging norms, pushing boundaries. He even suggests that folks with high-functioning autism or Asperger's might be on a slightly different position on the evolutionary scale.
So a different position on the evolutionary scale? Like what does that even mean?
Well, he suggests that their behavior might be governed by more pre-programmed patterns, so, less adaptable to changes in the environment. But, and this is the interesting part, this lack of adaptability could also be a source of strength, like a cognitive rigidity, you could call it, that allows for deep focus, specialization.
I see what you mean. It's making me wonder if there's a connection between that fixedness, that focus on certain patterns, certain systems, and the ability to make those groundbreaking discoveries. Like maybe you need that laser focus to see things that other people miss.
That's exactly what Fitzgerald's getting at. He even uses Isaac Newton as an example, speculating that maybe his autistic imagination is what helped him, discover the laws of gravity.
Okay, so we're starting to see how all these pieces fit together, right?
Yeah.
These autistic traits that are often seen as challenges could actually be essential for certain types of genius. But how exactly does Fitzgerald define this autistic intelligence? It seems like a pretty crucial concept to unpack here.
Well, he describes it as, and I'm quoting here, unconventional, unorthodox, strangely pure and original, akin to the intelligence of true creativity. So it's not just about being smart, in a traditional sense. It's about a very specific cognitive style, a way of thinking that prioritizes systems, patterns, and logic over things like social cues and emotional nuances.
So almost like a different operating system for the brain.
Yeah.
One that excels at processing information in a specific way.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And Fitzgerald is arguing that this different way of thinking is often at the heart of exceptional creativity. To really illustrate his point, he dives into these fascinating case studies, looking at, historical figures and trying to find signs of autism.
Oh, I bet you have some juicy examples. Where do we start?
Well, let's start with philosophy. Fitzgerald examines the life and work of Ludwig Wittgenstein, brilliant philosopher known for his work in logic and language, and notoriously eccentric.
Ah, Wittgenstein, the philosopher who was obsessed with the precision of language.
Right, that's the one. Fitzgerald points out that Wittgenstein was also known for, well, his intense focus, his social awkwardness, and even a fondness for, well, let's call them unconventional jokes, the kind that only make sense to a very specific type of mind.
I actually find that kind of humor really appealing. It's like a secret code that only certain minds can crack.
Right. It's fascinating. And, remember Fitzgerald's argument, autistic intelligence thrives on systems, patterns, logic, and what is a joke but a system of language with its own internal logic. So maybe Wittgenstein found those unconventional jokes so appealing because they resonated with his way of thinking.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Mhm.
Makes you wonder if those seemingly random quirks and eccentricities are actually, clues to how someone's brain is wired.
Exactly. And Fitzgerald goes on to argue that Wittgenstein's social awkwardness, rather than holding him back, might have actually contributed to his unique approach to philosophy. He was able to step outside those social norms and expectations that often constrain how we think, and really delve deeply into the structure of language and logic.
So his perceived weaknesses were actually strengths, at least when it came to his intellectual pursuits.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how many other brilliant minds throughout history might have been operating on a similar wavelength, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge because of their unique ways of seeing the world.
It's a fascinating thought. I'm sure we'll uncover some even more intriguing examples as we go along. But before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the idea that people with high functioning autism or Asperger's might be on a slightly different position on the evolutionary scale. Can you flesh that out a bit more? That seems like a pretty bold claim.
It is a bold claim, and it definitely requires careful consideration. What
Yeah.
Fitzgerald is suggesting is that these individuals might be, well, less driven by that need for social conformity,
Hmm.
for adaptation, the things that have shaped so much of human evolution. Instead, they're driven by a different set of internal motivations, this fascination with systems, patterns, and logic. And that leads them to excel in certain areas while struggling in others.
So it's not that they're more evolved or less evolved, but rather that they're evolved for a different set of challenges and opportunities.
Exactly. And he argues that this difference in their evolutionary trajectory might actually be a source of strength, allowing them to contribute to human progress in ways that more socially oriented individuals, well, might not be able to.
That's a fascinating and provocative idea. It really challenges us to rethink our assumptions about autism, genius, the diversity of human minds. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's move on to another one of Fitzgerald's compelling case studies. I'm eager to hear more about how he connects these seemingly disparate pieces together.
Absolutely. Let's step out of the world of philosophy for a minute and into the realm of politics, which I think you'll agree isn't typically associated with autistic traits.
You're absolutely right. It seems like you need to be incredibly socially adept to navigate that world. So who is this political figure that Fitzgerald finds so intriguing?
He analyzes Sir Keith Joseph, a prominent British politician. He was a close advisor to Margaret Thatcher. And here's the interesting part. Joseph struggled with social cues, impulsive speech, traits that you wouldn't typically associate with a successful politician.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Could you give us a specific example of what you mean?
Imagine a politician delivering a scathing attack on the Soviet Union at a family-friendly camping exhibition in front of confused families looking at tents and RVs. That was Sir Keith Joseph, not exactly known for his smooth social skill.
That's hilarious, but also kind of brilliant in its own way, right? It definitely breaks the mold.
Exactly. And he also had this deep, deep fascination with statistics. He believed that data held the key to understanding the world and shaping effective policies. Numbers don't lie, he'd often say.
I can definitely relate to that. Data can be incredibly persuasive, especially when you're, trying to make a point or convince someone of something. It's like a common language that transcends, emotional biases and subjective interpretations.
And that was precisely Joseph's belief. He saw statistics as the most reliable source of truth, a way to cut through the noise and get to the heart of complex issues. And Fitzgerald argues that this fascination with data, this need for absolute clarity and objectivity might have stemmed from his autistic intelligence.
So again, we're seeing how a trait that might be perceived as a weakness in some contexts could actually be a strength in others. Joseph's social awkwardness and his laser focus on data might have made him an unconventional politician, but they also allowed him to approach problems in a unique way. and to advocate for policies that were based on evidence rather than emotion.
Precisely. And it challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what it takes to be successful in different fields. Maybe the qualities that we typically associate with leadership and charisma aren't always the most important ones. Maybe in some cases it's the quiet, unconventional thinkers, the ones who see the world differently, who have the most to offer.
That's a really powerful message, and it makes me wonder if we're overlooking a lot of potential talent and innovation by focusing too narrowly on these traditional notions of success.
It's definitely a question worth considering, and it speaks to the broader theme of neurodiversity that Fitzgerald explores throughout the book. He argues that a society that values only one type of mind, one way of thinking, one way of being is ultimately limiting itself. We need those unconventional thinkers, the ones who challenge the status quo and see the world from a different perspective, to push us forward and help us solve those complex challenges that we're facing.
I love that message. It's a call to celebrate our differences and to recognize that what might seem like a limitation in one context could actually be a superpower in another.
Absolutely. And it ties back to the idea that evolution isn't about creating a single perfect type of human being. It's about creating a diverse ecosystem of minds, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, each capable of contributing to the collective good in its own unique way.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. And it makes me even more curious to delve deeper into Fitzgerald's exploration of autism and creativity.
Well, then let's keep going. Next, we'll dive into another fascinating case study that Fitzgerald examines the life and work of the brilliant mathematician Paul Erdos. Prepare yourself for a truly eccentric mind.
I'm ready. Bring on the eccentricity.
Yeah.
And listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into autism and creativity. Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we're unpacking Michael Fitzgerald's intriguing book, Autism and Creativity.
Before the break, we were just talking about how those autistic traits, often seen as drawbacks, might actually fuel those exceptional abilities.
And you left us hanging with a teaser about the mathematician Paul Erdos. Was he one of those eccentric minds that Fitzgerald talks about?
Oh, absolutely. Erdos was brilliant, prolific, and notoriously unconventional. I mean, this guy, he co-authored over 1,500 mathematical papers, more than any other mathematician in history. But he was also known for, showing up unannounced at colleagues' houses, like at any hour, ready to dive into mathematical discussions, often staying for days or even weeks.
Wow, that's dedication. But I can also imagine it would be a bit, disruptive to have a world-renowned mathematician suddenly appear on your doorstep demanding to talk about theorems.
Precisely. And this kind of social, I guess you could say, obliviousness is a recurring theme in Fitzgerald's analysis of these brilliant minds. It's like their intense focus on their work blinds them to those social cues and expectations that most of us, navigate pretty effortlessly.
So it's not that they're intentionally being, rude or dismissive. It's more like they're operating on a different wavelength, and those social niceties just aren't registering.
Exactly. And Fitzgerald argues that this difference in social processing can actually be an advantage when it comes to creativity. He draws on the work of psychiatrist Anthony Storr, who argued that human progress really stems from our discontent.
Okay, so we're not talking about the kind of discontent that makes you, wallow in misery. We're talking about the kind that motivates you to create, to innovate, to find solutions to problems.
Precisely. It's that spark of dissatisfaction with the status quo that pushes us to imagine something better, something different. And Fitzgerald suggests that individuals with high-functioning autism or Asperger's, they might experience a heightened sense of discontent because of their difficulty fitting into the social world.
So their discomfort with the social world might actually drive them to focus their energies on areas where they excel, like math or music or art. It's like they're channeling that discontent into creative energy.
That's exactly what Fitzgerald proposes, and it makes you wonder if those who fit in too easily, who are too comfortable with the way things are, might be less likely to challenge conventions and push boundaries.
That's a really interesting thought. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about about what it takes to be successful and creative. Maybe a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of that feeling of being an outsider can actually be a good thing.
It's a question worth pondering for sure. And it brings us back to Fitzgerald's central argument. Autism, often seen as a disability, might actually hold a key to understanding some of humanity's greatest minds. Now, he's not saying that everyone with autism is a genius, of course, but rather that certain autistic traits, the ones that we often perceive as limitations, can actually be assets in certain contexts.
It's a powerful message, and it aligns with the broader conversation about neurodiversity. You know, the idea that we need to value and celebrate the full spectrum of human minds, not just the ones that fit neatly within the norms.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another important point that Fitzgerald raises, the connection between genius and madness. It's a classic pairing, you know, one that has fascinated artists and writers and philosophers for centuries. And Fitzgerald doesn't shy away from exploring the darker aspects of this connection.
We've all heard stories about, you know, brilliant artists and scientists who struggled with mental health issues. Is